Ah, okay. Hello. Okay, we're going to do it like this. Hello, Facebook viewers. I'm not going to repeat everything that I said. Just to summarize, we're going to see some slides with theoretical trends and developments within online marketing and tourism, but more importantly, practical examples of how we do it in Amsterdam. I want to add to that not everything that's gold glitters in Amsterdam. We see many challenges as well. For us, it's always also about learning, failing basically, and doing it better next time. If you have any questions, just raise your hand and I can squeeze them into the presentation. And if it takes too long, then I will just ask you friendly to do them during lunch break. I will be available there as well. Okay. Just to raise up some slides that I also used in the plenary session and to show you the specific context of Amsterdam and our marketing and branding organization. We focus on contribution of our livability, attractiveness, prosperity of the city and the area. So that's basically our end goal. And when that's the end goal, maybe it's not our KPI anymore to get more and more and more visitors. So that's really important to be aware of, firstly. Secondly, main activities of our organizations are about building reputation on the one hand, and secondly, to really guide inhabitants, visitors, and businesses through the city and the metropolitan area. But as I added to the slide, economic impact isn't our end goal anymore. So it really should add to the livability of inhabitants. What does that mean? It means that we shifted from only tourism-based strategy towards a more holistic perspective. And as you could see now in this slide, it means we created more personas, more customer experiences and customer journeys. We created personas, customer journeys, for about 9 different types of users of the city. And that can be a startup considering moving towards Amsterdam, but it can also be a current inhabitant that we would like them to participate more on a cultural basis in Amsterdam. So that's a way different customer journey and a way different approach. But basically, it's about the same DNA, as I explained. The city and the DNA will never change. That's inside of us. My DNA makes up for me being 184, I have brown eyes and this type of hair. But that's caused by my DNA. That's DNA is inside of you. Just as all your cities or destinations are having your own DNA, making up for you to be unique as a venue, as a destination. But then again, of course, it's how to market and brand it. So the target groups, and then I wanted to add this just to give you a little bit of a warm-up session of a campaign that we did a few years ago. And this was the video that was not working, so I just added it quickly to the presentation.
What do you know about Holland? Flowers, windmills, picturesque canals, cheese, wooden shoes, master paintings from the Golden Age. Yes, we have it all. But
Let me show you what's really cool about Holland.
you call it organic and artisanal. We just call it food. You call it boutique, independent, alternative. We call it the 9 Streets. You call it exercise. We call it a way of life.
They still drive cars!
Dutch!
Oh, yep.
By the way, did you notice I'm speaking English? We all do.
Hi. Hello. Hi.
Hello. Welcome to Amsterdam.
Ik niet. Jullie noemen hem Van Gogh. Wij zeggen Van Gogh.
Did someone say Van Gogh?
You call it art? We call it the Rijksmuseum.
Dutch!
You call it green energy. We call it tradition. You call it... We call it Amsterdam. Come to Amsterdam in 2013.
You call it the travel day. We call it the first day of vacation. Holland, the original cool.
Visit us at holland.com/cool.
Dutch!
Well, not only Dutch anymore, right? KLM Air France. But anyways, I wanted to add this video to show you how we deal with online marketing, video marketing nowadays. This campaign was launched 2015 already, and it ran for 3 years in a row. In the first year, it got awarded with an award, HSMAH award, that was given to us in New York in 2015, being the best video campaign back then in the world, on a tourism level, of course. It shows you how you can deal with videos for your destination. But let me go back to the local challenges we face. As I mentioned in the plenary session, we have 19 million people coming to the city, 11,000 new inhabitants extra per year in the city. So the city is facing challenges regarding crowdedness, mobility, affordable housing. It's not about attracting more anymore. It's about different and better. And how can we create and optimize basically this huge popularity to create better impact for all inhabitants, but also to create a better customer journey for our visitors. The example that I gave this morning about every visitor wanting to go to the Van Gogh Museum at 11 in the morning, that's not really a pleasant visit for you as a tourist when you go to the Van Gogh and you're waiting in the queue for 3 or 4 hours maybe. So looking for ways to improve the customer journey, the customer experience is basically the core of all our activities that we are now implementing. So these are the local challenges, not only not really for us as a marketing and branding organization, but truly for the city on a broader scale. So you could see that to create a better impact, basically, and do it differently is the real main challenge being listed in these topics. So if you look in towards tourism and what it means for tourism, we see some trends, developments globally, but also affecting Amsterdam on a local basis. Of course, we see an increase of sustainable and ecotourism based activities. People wanting to experience these things in a higher way, but also we can see it from the ground, bottom up. So that's one thing that we can see in Amsterdam. I will give you some examples about that later on. As I mentioned as well, of course, the usage of video, AR technologies, VR technologies is something that we are looking for. I have to say on a personal level, as I mentioned also in the plenary session, VR, AR trends and developments, sure, they are there. I'm not saying that they are bad or you shouldn't look at it, but I also always think, what is the end goal? VR or AR, it's only adding up to the customer experience. So try to look at it from that approach. What do you want to reach? What do you want to achieve, basically? And if AR can add to that story, then yes, that's your thing to use. But always look at it from that perspective. The third one that's pretty interesting is that Sometimes we look at tourism as if we can really massage these tourists into a certain place, or like they are, robots, or well, we are all humans, you know. We want to have a human interaction, and also, like today, I am here as a business visitor in Po, but tonight I am a leisure visitor, right? And maybe I like it so much here in Po that I'm becoming a future resident. So what I want to say is, look at your, well, users. I don't know if users is a good word, but maybe people that make use of your city from a more holistic perspective. Because yes, you can see them as a tourist, but they can become different users for your city in the future. Give you some examples later on as well. And of course, finally, data, what data can mean with to robotics, automation, but of course, in the end, artificial intelligence, and how can that be implemented in tourism marketing. Give you some examples about this later on as well. But just to end with this, I think all these 4 trends and developments, I clustered them a little bit, I packaged them a little bit. Of course, we can think about and talk about more trends and developments, but all of it comes down to these 4. And all of these 4, in the end, contribute to the customer experience. Because video, AR, VR, it's all adding up to that experience. People wanting to get to see the city from a different perspective. They want to indulge themselves. With sustainable tourism, it's the same. People want to give something back. They want to be good to the local communities. So also there, it's all about that customer experience. That means for us that we build personas and customer journeys based on these customer experiences. So for inhabitants, we created 2 different kinds of customer journeys based on these phases. So for instance, for an inhabitant, it's not anymore about, we don't have to market Amsterdam towards an inhabitant. They know Amsterdam, of course. They have their own reputation on Amsterdam, okay? So we chosen a different entry level for the current inhabitants. For us, one of the goals of our inhabitants, current inhabitants, is to increase their cultural participation in the city. So what we did is we searched for their awareness of cultural events in the city. And if they are aware with the cultural events, what's their reputation on culture in Amsterdam? How do they look at culture in Amsterdam? Are they considering going there? And if not, what is holding them back? How can we increase the level of sales? So really the conversion of people going to cultural events. And in the end, when they visit, the loyalty phase, how did they like it? When they visited, did they had a good experience? Was it the right type of quality, the right thing that they wanted? So it's all about searching for ways to increase the customer journey for your right type of personas. For Amsterdam, as I mentioned, we have 2 personas for inhabitants and 4 for tourists. So, for instance, if we're talking about tourism and tourist journeys, it's way different, of course, than when we are talking about the journey of an inhabitant. To give you an example, we have a journey for first-time visitors to our city. Because we know lots of people who visit Amsterdam, they heard about Amsterdam somewhere and they think, oh yeah, I should go, and I have a reputation. I'm seeing the canals and the bikes, right? Can I ask you, what's the first thing that you think of when you think about Amsterdam? And Frank? Van Gogh? Flowers? Okay, you can say everything, eh? Bike, okay. Something else? Wheat, okay. Very good. Well, oh, okay, wheat, indeed. So everybody has a reputation about the city, you know, or has an image, a perception about your city. But it depends who you ask. If somebody has visited the city before, then their perception can change and can be very different. So we created one journey for first-time visitors, but we also created a journey for our repeat visitors, because we know that they are more aware, they have a different reputation or perception about the city. So the reputation of the city is different with them. And we can really base that on facts. Out of the 19 million people that visit the city, about 50% is a repeat visitor. So all the first-time visitors, or not all, but the majority of the first-time visitors, we know that they go to the Van Gogh and Frank House, the Canal District, maybe the Rijksmuseum, and they want to see the Red Light District. So I'm saying not all, huh? But these are the first-time visitors, and we know from data that the repeat visitors, they want to see different things because they've already been to those places. So why should we tell them again to visit the Anne Frank House and the Rijksmuseum and the Van Gogh? So it's really about shaping that journey and making more specific communication channels and messages for each persona. So basically, I would say it's about searching for the right message, for the right audience, on the right moment. That's really what our biggest challenge is nowadays. And with that, of course, the importance of data is huge. I think a few years ago, we transformed our organization from maybe 1 or 2 researchers into now having 4 data analysts. We merged data and marketing together. So the department is now called Data Marketing Strategy. And we can see that the marketing strategists, they also need to transform their ways of doing business. So we now generate lots of more data. But as I mentioned this morning, it's not only about more, you know. Sometimes there's discussions about, okay, we need more data. Well, the main thing that we should ask ourselves is, okay, what do we want to do with the data? So use thick data instead of big data, I would say. Because only if you implement it, if you use it, then it's really powerful, and then it has meaning. So for us, collection of data, analyzation, but also, of course, sharing and implementing the data is really important. And this slide it's in Dutch. I am aware, but it's just to show you how we use the data to create new KPIs. So I want to show you here the left box. These are the ambitions of the city and the metropolitan area. These are very abstract, holistic, general ambitions. So for instance, we want Amsterdam to be the best city to live in for inhabitants. That can be an ambition, right? For visitors, we want foreign and domestic visitors to have a very high appreciation level about Amsterdam. That's an ambition. The second box is about the indicator. So how can we really measure that, right? So for instance, the appreciation level is pretty easily measured to say, okay, how did they like their visit? How much did they spend? Do they want to come again? Do they recommend it? So these are all indicators that we measure, and we have KPIs for that. So ambitions, indicators, goals. And then for us, it makes it easier as well to work towards these goals with our online activities. So everything that we do should be contributing to those goals. And it makes it also easy for us, together with the City Hall, to cooperate better. Because we are a independent foundation, non-profit foundation, but we do get a subsidy from the city hall. And part of that subsidy is for us to contribute to these ambitions and goals. Okay, any questions about this? Because maybe that's a bit difficult or new, but that's something that we do, okay? Yeah. Yeah.
Who decides upon these KPIs and who agrees upon?
Many people, unfortunately. We have an alderman of economic affairs. City marketing and branding is part of the economic affairs department. He, in the end, approves the KPIs. But of course, he has many civil servants working for economic department. One of the civil servants is responsible for city marketing and branding. And together with him, we made up these KPIs, and we have to present these as well in the city council. And then the city council agrees on us to work on these KPIs.
So you need to collaborate with the politicians?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, because it's of course the city that they work for as a city council. So it's a public-private partnership. We are an independent non-profit organization. We get a subsidy from the Economic Affairs Department, but we also get revenues from our private partners. So theaters, museums, attractions, canal boat companies, tour operators, etc. Yeah. So data and measuring and adding up to the ambitions of your destination. And what we do with that is that we search for real-time insights in consumer behavior. So we are now, it's not finished yet, but we are now setting up a new dashboard matching up to our 9 personas that I mentioned. So 2 personas for inhabitants, 4 for tourists. And we want to have a real-time insight in their behavior, how they orientate, how they visit the city, how they experienced it. So what we do, as I mentioned, we're setting it up right now. So I cannot tell you about if it's a success or yet or not. But what we are now doing is asking all our visitors on our platforms, if it's an inhabitant or a tourist, somebody is visiting our site, our social media channels, we ask them to collaborate in this survey. And they can just answer some questions about why they want to visit Amsterdam or what they are looking on our site, how they experience the city. And we follow it up with an online research that's also available on mobile devices when they enter the city, or for inhabitants when they go to a cultural venue. So the good thing about this is that we included all our partners. We have 1,100 partners in the full Amsterdam area, theaters, museums, etc. And they all contribute to this research. So basically, when somebody enters the Van Gogh Museum and they enter the Wi-Fi network, they get a pop-up asking them to join the research of Amsterdam. And the good thing for the Van Gogh Museum is that they can add questions for their own venue to the research. So it's a win-win combination. We can use their visitors to gather data from them, but the Van Gogh can ask them questions as well. And with all the data from all the venues, we can share that with our private and cultural partners as well in the end. So when they have visited the city, being an inhabitant or a visitor, and when they go home, we can follow it up because, of course, we've asked their mobile numbers, and we asked their email addresses, and we can send them a quick questionnaire when they are at home. How did you experience the city? What did you like? What did you dislike, etc. But also, would you recommend it, or did you have any nuisances? So basically, again, it's about getting more comprehension about their customer experience And the good thing in the end is that we have a real-time insight in their behavior. So that's, yeah.
Are you tracking them, or is it just questions like spontaneous questions?
At the moment, it's a questionnaire, but together with another tool that I will show you later on, and which I also presented this morning, then we can really track them in a better way if they have given their allowance, and it's anonymous. So it's not that we know that you are watching or walking from A to B. We know the general traffic and ways of transportation, basically. So for tourism, for us, if we focus on tourism, because that's why we are here today, of course, is to build reputation of the city. And how do we build that? It's based on the uniqueness of the city. Like I mentioned, it's about innovation, creativity, spirit of commerce, to choose the right stories, but also to be specific and to not try to be everything. Like I mentioned, when you want to be everything, you're also nothing. So choose what makes you unique, and then pick the right stories that match up to that DNA, but also target it towards the right audiences. So, for instance, we will never target the young males from the UK to visit Amsterdam for pub crawling or boozing or whatever. And as I mentioned, yes, we target first-time visitors and repeat visitors because we know they are visiting the city and doing things that we would like them to do, to visit other neighborhoods, so we can create better impact for the full city. And yes, nice that we can influence them, but we really need to reach them at first, and that's something that we do with storytelling by ambassadors and influencers. And using those things is something that if we implement that, for us it's important to look at 3 ways basically. So if we have the customer journey, how can we implement that to these channels? So not every target audience is using social media or going to fairs. So it's always about the right message to the right target audience on the right moment. Give you an example of what we do. Basically our main website, iamsterdam.com, now attracting 20 million visitors. And we are now transforming the site based on the keywords that people use. So again, based on the personas. So if we know based on the keywords that people are using, okay, could be a first-time visitor, then we have different content streams available for them on the website. Because it's somebody else going to the site. It doesn't mean that they cannot go to other neighborhoods if they are a first-time visitor. Of course not. But we know better with our data and statistics and analytics, okay, who's coming to our site now with which keywords. So then we can easily make it better for them and serve them better content. So it's about online, social media, of course, more than 2 million followers on all our social media channels, but also offline, our visitor centers and magazines. And these ones I can explain later. So talking about the city getting crowded, building reputation, the rise of sustainable tourism, or basically the importance of sustainable tourism. For Amsterdam, as I mentioned, the holistic perspective is really important because we can see the city as being pretty small, and with these huge numbers coming into the city, we need to collaborate, we need to have understanding for each other. So we created a new platform or a new initiative with some cultural partners in the city, and that's called the Alternative Tourist Office. And the Alternative Tourist Office offers products for visitors that want to do different things. And one of the fun things that we created was the possibility to marry an Amsterdammer for a day. So we found residents. That was a pretty big thing, by the way. But the people that we asked, they were really enthusiastic about the idea, and they wanted to show people their city. And on the other hand, we had visitors wanting to experience the city in a different way. So we connected them, and now we are doing these marriages in our visitor center, like almost every week. You go there, you meet an Amsterdammer, and they take you on a few hours through the city. And maybe it's not a huge impact on in absolute numbers. It's not about millions, of course not. But it's also about the free publicity and the effect that it can cause to your city. And the understanding that it gives towards inhabitants. So this is one of the examples that we are now implementing in the organization. And another one is we offer people not to go on a regular boat trip into the canals, but to go fishing for plastic. Because unfortunately, the canals are also a bit polluted. Not very badly, but you can see sometimes pollution or stuff in the canals. So people can now book an excursion. They go on this boat. They get explanation about how the canal ring was built 400 years ago. So it's a cultural excursion, but they can also add something to the city, give something back, and basically they pick up garbage. And they get awarded if they picked up the biggest garbage. So it's also a gamification element. And these are all things that we offer online. So on our website and on our platforms. Another thing is how we deal with video marketing. And again, it's about that connection between locals and visitors. So what we used in this video campaign, we used inhabitants from all kinds of backgrounds, old, young, black, white, fat, thin, male, female, whatever, but also people who were born in Amsterdam and people that were basically this guy is from the US, but he's living in Amsterdam now for the past 4 years. And the fun thing about this is Amsterdam is having 180 nationalities living in the city. And this is something that's truly special, I would say, for the city, because there are not a lot of cities in the world that have these amounts of nationalities living in the city. So for Amsterdam being this tolerant city, we decided to include these residents also in our scheme of ambassadors. So basically we say you're not an Amsterdammer by birth, but you're an Amsterdammer at heart. So it doesn't mean where you're from. You can also be an Amsterdammer like this guy living in the city for only 3 years. And he's now showing the city, his neighborhood, where he lives in, towards tourists. And we created 22 videos in Dutch and in English, with residents telling about their neighborhoods and giving them their suggestions to the city. This is another one. This is Jennifer Tosh. She is promoting her neighborhood, the Westerpark. And what we saw is that the traditional marketing campaigns that we transformed into these ones nowadays, that's a big shift, but also we can see that the visitors of the city are really appreciating this kind of marketing. So in not one video, we have the main highlights being used. So no Anne Frank, no Van Gogh, but really smaller venues and smaller places, like local hidden gems. And that's really paying off. So really cool to see that. Second thing that we work on is guiding people in a smarter way. And I have a little video I want to show you to to support that idea.
Number one, if people have too many choices, they won't choose at all. One of my favorite studies in this area is by Sheena Iyengar. And Dr. Iyengar set up tables in grocery stores with jars of jam. And some of the tables had 6 jars of jam on them, and sometimes the tables would have 24 jars of jam. And she was interested in finding out if the number of choices that people had affected their decision and their purchasing process. What she found was that the tables that had 6 jars of jam on them, 40% of the people coming by would stop and taste the jam. On the tables that had 24 jars of jam on them, more people would stop. 60% instead of 40% would stop and taste the jam. But there's a surprise when you look at how many people actually purchased. When the tables had 6 jars of jam, 30% of the people actually purchased a jar of jam. When the tables had 24 jars of jam, even though more people stopped, only 3% of those who stopped actually purchased. And what we know is that people will tell us they want lots of choices. If you ask people how many choices do you want at the website, they'll tell you, oh, show me everything. But we now know that they may want a lot of choices, but if you give them too many choices, they'll freeze and not make a decision at all.
So that was really, really evident for us as well. We had statistics up from our website that people were really freezing because we were so enthusiastic about our city and we wanted to show them everything. But people were really stressed out, basically, because they needed to choose themselves. So we need to help people making their decisions in a smarter way. So how can you do this? It's an example that I bring because I think it's really specific and really can mean something. It's a pretty new initiative we launched about 1.5 years ago, and it's a chatbot that we created together with the innovation office of the City Hall, and the chatbot connects the social media profiles of our fans to our cultural database. Because we found out that for our inhabitants, for instance, they want to go to culture, they are aware of culture, they have a good perception about cultural events, but they are always a bit stressed out because there's so much to choose from. So we decided, okay, we really should be more effective by promoting culture towards inhabitants and visitors. But how can we do that? Well, by knowing better what to promote to whom. So that's why we use their interests and preferences from their social media profiles. And together with this algorithm and artificial intelligence tool, we connect it to the cultural database. So if somebody is has a preference or interest for comedy, cabaret, then it's more likely for us to give them a push notification on Thursday afternoon, because we know that that's the moment that they're going to plan their weekends, the majority. And then we can send them these push notifications via the mobile, via Facebook Messenger, and in the future I hope we can also include this for WhatsApp and maybe Instagram. And this way we can personalize the suggestions, the cultural suggestions that we make towards our inhabitants and visitors. So it's not about a bulk message of saying this is our cultural calendar and go ahead, search for yourselves, but we give a personal suggestion every week based on their own preferences. At the moment we have about 10,000 subscriptions, and what we can also do with the people that are getting these push notifications, if they make one suggestion favorite, or they save it, or they book a ticket from it, we measure those interactions. Because every time that one gives it like a heart, or saves it, or books a ticket, we know the suggestion is important, it's relevant. And that way we can measure the suggestions that we give. If people are not selling it, buying it, if not saving it, not giving it hearts, then we are looking for our suggestions to improve them, to make the experience better. So it's just one example of guiding people smarter. Another thing that we now do is with our I Amsterdam city card. As I mentioned this morning, we gather lots of data from the card. We have about 200,000 people buying an I Amsterdam city card per year. So that's really good for the data team. They are very happy with it, and we can create segments. People going to, for instance, the Nemo Science Museum, they also go to the I Film Museum. And that's pretty special because it's a science museum and it's a film museum. How does that add up? So we had, well, pretty profound data analysts going into research, and they found out that both buildings are very architectural. So they are very modern, and the people are only visiting just to have pictures because of the buildings. So basically what we found out with all the 200,000 people using the city card is that we can create segments of people looking for architectural buildings, people doing family activities, people going to the old painters. So now we are building these journeys of these segments, and we created an application in which we can give personalized suggestions again towards these segments. So that's something that you can see here. This is the next phase, because we now know how busy it is on some places in the city. We can also give this information back inside the application. So when you, it's not yet finished, but in the future, when you use the I Amsterdam City Card application, you can say, okay, I want to go to the Van Gogh now. Then you should buy a time slot ticket, we say, because at the moment it's full or it's popular. So we suggest you go in the afternoon at 4 o'clock, for instance. It's even cheaper and it's a more friendly visit for you. You don't have to wait in the queue. So in this way, we can use that data to optimize the customer experience. In the end, that's also better for our inhabitants. If I bike to my office in the morning, I always pass the Anne Frank house. Up until last year, there were huge queues all around the church. And people were standing on the streets, they were littering, it was chaos. But that also affects the livability of inhabitants. So if we can optimize the customer experience and the journey of visitors, it also affects the livability of inhabitants. So that's really important to think about. Another way, guiding smarter. This is the example that I gave this morning, so I'll skip these slides. But what is important about this is, again, that journey that these people go through. So we know that lots of first-time visitors also want to see the flower fields and the windmills. So based on their journeys, we created these cross-media platforms. But again, we have to make it easy for them. So what we do is we work with these articles. 10 things you should do. 10 tips or 5 tips or 5 things. Or these lists make it easy for them, less stressed out to choose themselves. That's something that we use towards the visitors of the metropolitan area. But also we created mini videos, like 1-minute videos of highlights within the neighborhood. So if you want to see the windmills, then this is the video that you can really take upon. But again, here, it's not about the famous windmills. We also say to them, if you really want to have an authentic experience and want to avoid the crowds, we have more windmills in the Amsterdam area than only these ones. So we steer them towards other places as well, just to improve the impact of all the incoming visitors. And And another thing that we did with this campaign is to work with lots of ambassadors and influencers. So we organized press trips and influencer trips. We invite these guys over to the city. When they are from abroad, we also invite them to hotels. Hotels are offering accommodation towards these journalists and influencers. We do not pay journalists and influencers, by the way. So that's something I want to make clear. We offer them a program. We offer them beautiful insights about the city for 1, 2, 3 days maybe. And we show them what the city has to offer next to the city center. Because everybody always wants to go to that city center, especially the first-time visitors. But for us, as I mentioned, it's about improving the impact of tourism. So we steer them to other places. And as you can see here, we included VR for them so they can go to the city center. But with VR, we stimulated them and we showed them what the city and the area more has to offer. And that was basically the start for us to take them to these places. So in the beginning, they were in awe when they were in the city center having their VR glasses on. And they were like, oh, wow, where is this? And 1 hour later, they were really walking around in those areas. So that was really a truly amazing experience for them, which gave us lots of free publicity. And these are, of course, more traditional things. So also here, yes, okay. Great. Also here, the slides that I showed this morning, we can really see that these efforts are contributing to our end goal, meaning steering more people to visit other places outside the city as well. Thick data. This is a nice one. I explained this, of course, this morning, but very briefly. And I want to expand a little about this before we can go to the questions. Our quality visitor and what can give thick data to us. We had interviews done and analysis of statistics. It showed us that the majority of the nuisance is caused by these guys. Young males from the UK and Holland. And we really know pretty well what they are looking for, how they Google, how they search on our site. And we connected that also to our data of where these guys are staying in the city and where they are going in the city. So all this data is very important, but how do you implement it? And that's where big data becomes thick data, I think. So basically we used this data and we created a framework for this campaign. It was pretty scary, I have to say, because as a marketing and branding agency going into this target audience, dealing with nuisance, it can go very wrong, I must say. But it was pretty cool to see that by using your inhabitants and really looking for the pain points, you know, and the challenges that we are facing in the city, you can do something about it. So we created the framework that the first thing was very important is to create impact before arrival, because they already have a perception before they visit the city, a perception of Amsterdam and everything is allowed. And we wanted to change that. We know who to reach, so we can target them really, really good. But we also knew they are visiting full year round. So every weekend, basically, there is a new group of guys. So we needed to have a campaign that's always on. And the last thing that was very important, of course, is to be really visual and to tell this as well to our inhabitants and stakeholders. So this is the full customer journey of the campaign. Lots of free publicity. When we launched the campaign, we were on the cover of the New York Times, of the Guardian, on the national news. When people search for boozing or cheap flights to Amsterdam, they will see this campaign. Also, Booking.com added a pre-arrival email specifically sent to this target audience. Because they know, okay, these guys are matching the target group. We know when they are traveling, and Booking added to the campaign that they are sending these pre-arrival emails now. And entering Schiphol, the city center, and this is the example that was missing out this morning. The digital screens in the city center only being used on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And this is the geofencing message of the campaign. When these guys are visiting the city center, the areas where nuisance is caused by them, then they will see the campaign in their timelines on social media. Great story, but what were the results? Last slide, we gained over 200K in media value. Huge reach on social every week. But more importantly, we saw that the target group now really recognizes the campaign and is more aware that causing nuisance is not allowed. In the end, a main thing that I think is really important, they weren't really thinking about this issue beforehand, but after they saw the campaign, they are. So that's a very big change in perception and reputation on the city. Last slide, but this is something I can talk to during the conversation and questions, I would say. So,
okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you, Nico. This morning you were talking about the regulations on Airbnb.
Yeah.
Do you have regulations on flight or things like that? Because most of these people coming from UK, they come with maybe EasyJet, Ryanair.
That's right, EasyJet. There are not yet regulations on how many EasyJet flights. And that's very. It's also a very hard issue. I do business trips sometimes using EasyJet as well. So I don't think that we can really put limits on EasyJet or Ryanair. But what is more important is to work on the perception with all your partners. What is more important is that the city hall should look at the product also. So in Amsterdam, of course, like I mentioned this morning, we still have lots of coffee shops. We still have the red light district with prostitution. We still have low quality souvenir shops. We still have fast food chains in the city center. I would say it's also important when you want to change the reputation and the behavior of people to look at your product. That's the main thing to begin with. I'm not saying the red light district should be closed, but we should look at it from a different perspective and to build it.
Sorry, a quick question, but it's on the previous slide. When did you, I don't know how to say, diffuser, broadcast the messages? And do you have like a feedback on the citizens?
Yeah. There was in-depth interviews done with the residents of the city center, and they were also part of the steering group of the campaign. So we had sessions with inhabitants of the city center. We asked them, okay, what do you think about the description of the target group? What do you think about the creatives of the campaign? And they were really ambassadors of the campaign, and they supported the campaign extensively. So they were really happy with the campaign. Yeah.
I have a question about transportation.
Yeah.
How do you include mobility and transportation in your strategy? Because the visitor arrive in the city, they are in the city, they leave the city to go to Holland, and it's a very important point, I think, no?
Yes, of course, very important. In Amsterdam, we work together with, how do I translate this? It's an alliance, basically, an alliance of public transport companies. We have 5, it gives me headaches sometimes, 5 different public transportation companies in the Amsterdam area. We have the National Railway, we have the local one, we have the 2 in the Amsterdam area. And 5 to 7 years ago, okay, it was enough. So then they decided finally to work together more closely. And together with them, we are now working on different programs like zero emission, optimizing the travel schemes between the companies. And we also added optimizing the customer journey. So the example that I gave this morning, for international visitors visiting the city a few years ago, then you should buy separate tickets for every company. Now you can just buy one ticket and use them for all companies. And they make agreements behind the door how to compensate each other on the tickets that are sold and used, because we can measure that, of course, and then we can send invoices to each other. So that's how it's organized now. Some things about transportation. We invested lots of money in our new public transport system in Amsterdam. We created a new subway line, and now there are discussions to take this line also from the City Hall to Schiphol Airport. There is already, of course, a regular train connection, but we also looking for ways to maybe include the subway to go to the airport. There are discussions about opening up a new, smaller airport in the Amsterdam area to take away the biggest nuisance from Schiphol Airport and to basically spread it a bit. And also, we are now implementing new measurements about touring cars, coaches. They used to go into the city center, but the city center is pretty small. So now the coaches, they should park outside the city, and then transportation is with electric mobility or public transport or by the canals with boats, electric boats. So these are just some examples of how we deal with mobility.
Other questions?
I have a question about your alternative tourist office.
Yeah.
How big is the team working on this project? And is there a physical information point? And I'd also like to know how do you find these locals, inhabitants who are willing to become a real ambassador and who want to show people around?
Yeah, those are many questions in one. The team is very small. It's me and 2 very enthusiastic Amsterdammers that were not really working for our company, but they were just very committed Amsterdammers wanting to do better with tourism in Amsterdam. And we discussed this idea 2 years ago, and we had many sessions together, and we used our networks basically to be included in the idea. So we held many sessions, brainstorms to include more partners, more companies, to challenge them to make up new initiatives, new activities for tourists. And basically that's the network that we now use. And we have about 20 activities that you can do now. So not a lot. I think it's about 30 euros. Yeah. So it's maybe a bit more than normally, but yeah, it's a special experience. What were the other questions that you had?
How do you find people?
Is there a location? Is there a special information point?
Good question. Yeah, no, there is a website, social media channel, and we offer our official tourist office as being the physical alternative tourist office, because that's already there, and that's where we already welcome over 1 million visitors per year. So of course that's better to use that one instead of creating a new one, which costs lots of money again.
your network of people that has nothing to do with the greeters, for example, or people who are selling experiences on Airbnb on
Airbnb experiences is of course some of the companies that are in the alternative tourist office also offer the things on Airbnb experiences, but they are very likely to do it with us as well because we are a local initiative and we don't charge commission as Airbnb does. So basically it's also about reliability and trust and having a local challenge supporting this. For instance, there is a beautiful park in a new neighborhood called New West. That park, it's like a farm, and they have a big garden where you can pick your own vegetable and fruit. And that was only focusing on inhabitants and the neighborhood. And we started conversations with them, and they were looking for new customers as well, wanted to have a better reputation towards tourists. So now we have an excursion towards that garden and farm for tourists, so they can help the farm and they can pick their own vegetables and fruits. So that's another example of the activity.
I have a question about, I've read and heard a lot about the removal of the I Amsterdam sculpture in front of the Rijksmuseum.
Yeah, sure.
And a lot of people said, well, it was because inhabitants prefer the three red crosses. Inhabitants were annoyed by people gathering around with the bikes. What's the real reason of that? And is it something that that marks a move, a change in your marketing?
The real reason why we removed the sign, the letters from the museum square, is because it was getting so crowded over there. And it was causing sometimes dangerous situations because it was located in front of the Rijksmuseum, and there were like bicycle lanes behind it. So people were crossing the bicycle lanes without watching the bikes, and it was getting too crowded, too much dangerous situations. We didn't want that. That was the main reason. But the letters, they still exist, and we still have them. In fact, we have 3 sets of big letters, but they are moving from neighborhood and an attraction or beautiful venue to another venue. And so basically we use that to show other parts of the city that are very beautiful and special and fun to visit as well. So it's really adding up to our strategy of broadening up the reputation and steering more impact into other neighborhoods. So that's how we deal with it nowadays.
Okay, maybe just a last question, and Nico will be available today and tomorrow.
What difficulties did you face moving from a sort of top-down approach to a more ecosystemic one?
Many. Many, because, for instance, we work as a public-private partnership also with private touristic partners who just want money or just want more visitors. And sometimes that's a very hard discussion, but we always try to steer them away from only economic KPIs by saying, okay, if we give you a lot more visitors tomorrow, how can we maintain to have a very livable and lovable city in the future? You know, are we not going to sell it out? Because in the end, that's not what they want either. They want to have a sustainable business as well. They want people to have a good experience as well. Because if they don't have that one, then they will go home. If we look into the customer journey, the loyalty phase, they will go home and they will say, Amsterdam, what a shitty place. I had such a shitty experience. It was expensive. It was crowded. People were shouting names to me because I was not really welcomed. The inhabitants are not happy with tourism. So in the end, it's about the conversation that we needed to have with the touristic partners. I'm not saying everybody is aligned. It's everyday work, but that's a main challenge. main challenge is also to create new KPIs. And that's of course influencing that first conversation. So we need to find new goals, new end goals. And then lastly, we're doing more, I think, smarter, better, with less money. 6 years ago, we got 3 million euros extra from the City Hall to put Amsterdam back on the map again. And the last years, the City Hall is saying to us, well, you're doing a good job, you can make it on your own, right? So we lower your subsidy. But they still expect us to do lots of other things towards the ambitions of the city. So I think the usage, implementation of data, thick data, is really important in that, because we can create more efficient activities.
How did you educate them on getting this new mindset?
Well, as you mentioned, as you can see, I can talk pretty easily. So, so we have many discussions and sessions with partners and with the City Hall, with civil servants, with the aldermans. We have many networks as well. So we have, with over having 1,100 partners, we have like what we call steering groups. And the steering groups, we have a steering group for restaurants, steering group for hotels, steering group for culture, steering group for businesses, for conventions. All these steering groups, we talk to them every 2 months. And they tell us what's going on in their sector, in their industry. And we talk about these topics with the City Hall as well. So, so that's really important, to be aligned constantly. Why? Because it's not us who are the city, it's not the City Hall, it's not the inhabitant, and it's not the tourism industry. We are it together. So we need to cooperate and be aligned.
Thanks a lot, Nico. I think now it's time for lunch.